The Alzheimer's Association suggests these steps for legal planning. Take inventory of existing legal documents. Sarah and Bill were at a good starting point. They already had wills that were up to date, but they reviewed them and decided to make some minor changes. Make legal plans for finances and property. Bill typically handled finances, but he hadn't realized the planning needed to assure that they had adequate financing for Sarah's care as the disease progressed. This included thinking about and planning for the financial costs of paid caregiving and the costs of residential care, should that be needed. As we will discuss later in this module, they also needed to talk about plans for Sarah's future health and long-term care preferences, although Bill was reluctant to discuss this. Later, we'll describe how Sarah, with the help from the options counselor, helped her family, or at least her children, to become more comfortable talking about a future when she might need more help than her husband or children could provide. Sarah named Bill to make decisions on her behalf. They signed documents naming him her healthcare representative and power of attorney for finances and property. After reading about the need for alternates to the primary designated decision maker, and after talking more with their children, they named their daughter Joyce as the alternate healthcare representative and their son John as the alternate power of attorney for finances and property. The options counselor directed them to several other resources as well, including a toolkit for long-term services and supports available on the ADRC website. Bill and their children reviewed these materials and discussed them with Sarah. The documents provided were very helpful to Sarah and Bill as they navigated financial planning. The ADRC Planning for Your Future toolkit was especially helpful to Bill because it provided worksheets to help estimate costs of various long-term services and supports, and helped him begin to consider how they would be paid for. As we described in Module 7, finances were a concern for Bill because he retired earlier than planned, and he and Sarah had no long-term care insurance. As Sarah approached 65, he contacted the Senior Health Insurance Benefits Assistance Program, or SHEBA, to learn more about Medicare and other insurance coverage. The toolkit provided helpful information on using assets to pay for long-term services and supports, including the option of a reverse mortgage. He also learned about setting up a trust fund to support Sarah and protect his own financial future. Information about publicly funded options in case their own funds were depleted was included. However, with the advanced planning, Bill gained confidence that he could preserve their assets and reduce the likelihood of needing public assistance. The SHEBA volunteers told Bill about the role of senior Medicare patrol volunteers in preventing fraud. An advance directive is a legal document that includes a person's choice of her healthcare representative. Remember that the Alzheimer's Association talks about building a care team with a person with dementia, and the healthcare representative is a key member of that team. A healthcare representative is the person designated to make health decisions on the person's behalf in case they are incapacitated. Because of the progressive nature of dementia, it is important for people living with dementia to identify and name a healthcare representative and an alternate healthcare representative as soon as possible while they still have the capacity to do that. An additional purpose of the advance directive is for people to provide detailed information about what they want or don't want regarding their care if they are incapacitated. This could be specific to the end of life, but it is also important if the person is permanently unconscious or, as in the case with dementia, can no longer communicate healthcare preferences. Advanced directives often include preferences about use of life supports or use of artificial food or water in a variety of situations. These are particularly important if treatment would cause more harm than good, such as permanent and severe pain. The healthcare representative must honor and make decisions that are consistent with the advanced directives. However, the person may choose not to provide details about their wishes and indicate that the healthcare representative is to make these decisions on their behalf. Advanced directives are completed by the person and must be signed and witnessed while the person still has capacity. The healthcare representative also signs the document agreeing to serve as healthcare representative. Most people in the early stages of dementia and many of those in the middle stages have the capacity to appoint healthcare representatives. They are able to convey their wishes about who will make decisions for them and understand the consequences of identifying that person. It is important to emphasize that everyone, whether they have an advanced directive or not, will always get care for comfort and cleanliness, regardless of other end-of-life decisions. Bill and Sarah had 2 additional resources specific to healthcare planning and end-of-life planning. One was the Consumer's Toolkit for Healthcare Planning developed by the American Bar Association. The toolkit for healthcare advanced planning consists of 10 sections to help people plan for their future health needs. It starts with how to select a healthcare representative, to consider whether some conditions might be worse than death, how they can weigh odds of survival, personal priorities and spiritual values important for medical decision making, and after death decisions to think about now, such as where funeral will be, whether there will be burial, cremation, and information of that sort. There's also a proxy quiz for families and physicians. Conversation scripts, getting past resistance, what to do after signing the healthcare directive, guide for healthcare proxies or healthcare representatives, and various resources for advanced planning for healthcare. Each section poses questions that will help the person and their healthcare representatives really think about the issue. Examples include personal priorities and spiritual values that are important to making medical decisions, after death decisions, and making decisions about when to seek or forego training. A couple of the sections of the Consumer Toolkit proved especially useful to Sarah and Bill. One was a proxy quiz. Proxy is another term for health representative. Separately, Sarah and Bill answered a series of questions and then compared them. Research shows that without prior discussion, family members and other proxies often do not really know what a person wants. Bill was surprised at some of Sarah's decisions. One in particular took a lot of discussion and clarification with Sarah's doctor. Bill would have thought that Sarah would have wanted fluids and nutrition through an IV if she could not eat, but she was strongly opposed to it. The doctor explained to Bill that IV fluids and nutrition often cause discomfort for the person in the last stages of life. The second was a tool called conversation scripts. We've talked about some of these before. But although Sarah had a hard time articulating her desire to have conversations about future planning, particularly long-term services and supports, reading through this section resonated with her, and she could point to specific questions and have Bill and her children read it. Although he remained uncomfortable, as we described in Module 7, Sarah and Bill did proceed to talk about residential care when their children were present. Having had these discussions, ultimately help Bill when a transition in living situation was needed. The options counselor also directed Bill and Sarah to resources specific to advanced planning in Oregon by clicking on the Oregon Health Decisions link on the right side of the page. Although sections of the guide are available on the web, Sarah's son directly contacted Oregon Health Decisions to buy a copy of the full guide. The guide includes definitions of terms specific to Oregon, conversation starters, discussion questions, and worksheets. This guide can help the person and their representatives really think about the issues in detail. Sarah and her family used the forms in the back of the guide for Sarah's advanced directives. With all of the tools in advanced planning, it is important to maintain a person-centered perspective. Through conversations with her family, Sarah also conveyed what quality of life meant to her. According to Joanne Lynn, a geriatrician and expert in end-of-life care, this is the most important aspect of planning for end of life. It is part of the advanced care planning she feels is often missing. Let's listen to what Joanne has to say.